Well, again, welcome everyone to our service today. And thank you, ladies, for your beautiful song. Today we are continuing in our study, looking at parts of the book of Ecclesiastes. Today we'll be looking at some of the thoughts and ideas that are found in chapter 9 of Ecclesiastes, and that's found on page 653. If you want to turn there and follow along as we look at some of the verses, talk a little bit about some of the meaning of what Solomon wrote. In the book of Ecclesiastes, Solomon asks and discusses quite a few questions related to the meaning of life. And sometimes Solomon admits that he does not know the answers to these questions. There are some things which we simply cannot understand. Isaiah 55, verse 8, talks about that God's ways and His thoughts are beyond ours. There are some things that we simply do not know, and we cannot understand even if God attempts to explain them to us. And of course, the book of Job, that theme is found throughout that story as Job talks with his friends about why these things that took place happened to him. But as we read in the scripture reading in verse 1, despite not knowing all the answers to these questions that we face in life, we can take a sense of hope and security in the fact that everything is in the hands of God. There's an old gospel song, He has the whole world in His hands. And all of life, everything about us is in the hands of God. And all the meanings of life, the explanations of life, the theories of life, all of those things have to be understood in the relationship and in their connection to God and His control and His creation and His design. And that goes back to one of the basic principles that we talked about before. The fear of God is the beginning of wisdom. Understanding that God is in control, understanding that God has everything in His hands, is a first step for us to develop a realistic and a solid philosophy of life and guiding set of values. If we are in harmony with God and His principles, then we can rest in the assurance that God is in control. And the problem comes as if we decide we want to go our own way. If we are out of harmony with God, if we want to walk our way instead of following in His path, then we're going to run into problems. And they may not always seem immediate, they may not always seem obvious, but when we follow the way of the world instead of walking in God's path and following Christ's footsteps, living the life in harmony with His example, we are going to have trouble. Now, one observation that Solomon dwells on and talks about a little bit for a number of verses in chapter 9 is the common fate, the common destiny that all of us face under the sun. And again, under the sun, what does that mean? We talked about that before. Under the sun. He uses that phrase quite a bit throughout the book of Ecclesiastes. Under the sun means here in this world, in this life, in the temporal existence that we have. Under the sun doesn't mean all of life beyond this life. It doesn't include the eternity that God has promised us and that we are looking forward to. Under the sun simply means here and now. What we have to face as mortal humans living on this earth. And in that situation, under the sun, living on this earth, all people face a common destiny. Every man, every woman, every child is going to die someday. It doesn't really matter how rich you are, how poor you are, how wise you are, how foolish you are. None of these factors will allow you to escape that final destination. Now, that doesn't mean that a wise and a foolish man don't have different lengths of life. A wise man is going to have probably a longer life. He's going to avoid making some mistakes. He's going to evade some of the difficulties and trials and consequences that come from foolish behavior. Foolish people, the consequences of foolishness are usually a lot of problems, a lot of troubles, a lot of trials, and usually an early death. If you live a foolish life, you're not going to live as long. And we see that in the statistics of insurance and medical reports. Just this week, I was reading articles about vegetarian lifestyle and how latest reports confirm what we as Adventists have been preaching and teaching for many years, for centuries actually, that a vegetarian lifestyle is going to have health benefits. You're going to live longer. The latest research, 33% less problems with heart disease, which is the #1 killer in the United States. Other statistics show that vegetarians live about 10 years longer, everything else being exactly equal. Following God's plan, following God's guidelines, is going to lead to a longer and happier and healthier life. On the average. On the average. There are exceptions. Sometimes foolish people live a long time. It doesn't matter what they do. They seem to be lucky, you know. They do stupid things and yet they survive. It's kind of like watching a cartoon, you know. You see the cartoon and, you know, these people are doing stupid things and falling off buildings and getting slammed in doors, and yet they just pop up and keep on going. And sometimes foolish people and sinful people, they seem to not suffer any immediate consequences for their foolishness and their stupidity and their lifestyle. You know, they seem to have everything going for them, even though they're very stupid, foolish, wicked, crazy. But of course, we know that beyond this living under the sun, beyond the time that we have here, there is something more. And as Christians and as Seventh-day Adventists, we look forward to that reward of eternity. And that is something that all are going to face as well, is judgment. Solomon talks about that in a number of different places. All are going to face judgment, and that's not just the end of life here, this temporal life under the sun, but that's facing eternal life or eternal death. And those who refuse to follow and live and walk in harmony with God, they will face that eternal death when judgment comes. And so, while we live under the sun, we all face the same end. But that does not mean that we cannot have hope and that we cannot live and work in a way which brings happiness and benefit to ourselves and other people. And in Ecclesiastes 9, verses 4 through 6, Solomon talks about some of the benefits of life. While we are alive, we have opportunities. While we are alive, we have hope. While we are alive, we have a chance to make choices, to make decisions, to change, to improve, to help ourselves and to help other people. While we are alive, we have a choice available to us to make a difference in our lives and the lives around us. And every day, every hour, every minute that we are alive, we make choices. Sometimes without even really thinking about it. We just do things unconsciously sometimes. But we make choices, and our choices affect us, and they affect the people around us. While we are alive, we can make a difference. And we have a responsibility, while we are alive, to use the time that we have in a profitable way for ourselves and for the people around us. All of us have the same amount of time in a day. We may not all live the same length of time. Some of us may live longer, some people may die younger. But each day that we are alive, we all have an equal amount of time. It doesn't matter whether you're a man or a woman, an American or Japanese, the day is still 24 hours. How are you using that time? What are you doing with that gift God has given you? When I was in university, I took a management class as part of my business administration program. And one of the things that we had to do was study time management. We read a little book, The 10-Minute Manager. And our professor made us keep a time schedule for it was like 1 month. Every day we had to keep track of everything that we did. We had to write out a log. I woke up at 7:35, I brushed my teeth for 3 minutes. After that, it took me 2 minutes to get dressed. I spent 5 minutes walking to my class. We had to detail every single thing that we did as far as we could keep track of every single day for 1 month. And then we had to turn that into the professor, and he put it into the computer. I feel sorry for the students who had to type all that in. And then he printed out computer reports, which he gave to each student, and also he had one for the whole class. And it was interesting seeing how people spent or wasted time. And even looking at your own log, it's like, wow, I spent this much time doing this, or oh, I can't believe I wasted so much time doing that. Or I only studied this amount. I thought I was studying more. Time management, something that business recognizes as very important. When you're at work, usually you have a lot of companies have some sort of a time clock. You punch in, the company wants to know when you're there. When you finish, you punch out. Many companies, it's computerized, they keep track of everything. Some companies, if you're working on projects, you have to type in a time code. I worked on this project from 9 to 11. I spent this time working with a customer. Companies keep track. They want to know how you're using your time. They want to know how to bill and expense the time for the work that you do. And yet, as people and as Christians, how conscious are we about our time? How careful are we about the time that we spend doing things? Do you keep track? Do you realize how much time you're using for the various activities each day, each week, each month? While we are alive, we have control over our time. We can make choices and decisions. While we are alive, we have knowledge. we can learn, we can discover more, we can teach other people and increase their knowledge. While we are alive, we can process information and make a difference through the information that we share to other people. Once you die, you don't know anything else. The dead know nothing, we read. They have no more knowledge of life on this earth. While we are alive, we do have knowledge. We do know about what's going on, and we can use that to make a difference in our lives and in the lives of others. And related to that, participation, action. As I said before, you can make choices and decisions while you are alive. You can choose what to do. Once you are dead, that opportunity is gone. While you are alive, make a difference with your actions, with the choices that you make. Use the knowledge that you have to benefit other people. Because when life is over, those opportunities are going to be gone. And too often, people on their deathbed, they have regrets. Oh, if I only had more time. If I only had more time, I would do this, or I would talk to this person, or I would. Often people have regrets. They want more time. And they say, if I had more time, I would do things differently. But you know, that doesn't always turn out to be true. Sometimes people who are very sick, they think they're dying, they make all these promises. I'll change, I'll do things differently, and they recover, and what happens? They just go back to what they were doing before. It's our nature. It's our humanity. We can't help ourselves without God's help. With God's help and God's power, we can make good use of our time and the opportunities that we have. And so Solomon, as he looks at the benefits of being alive, while we are alive, we can make a difference. While we are alive, we can make choices. While we are alive, we can affect other people with our words and actions. In the next few verses, Solomon reflects on what we should do related to life, how we should enjoy life and make the best of the situation that we are in. And sometimes when people read that, they get a little bit confused. Solomon talks about 4 things that we should enjoy. And sometimes when people read these verses, they think that Solomon is becoming kind of fatalistic. That, it's all out of our control, so just enjoy life. And that isn't really what Solomon is saying at all. Solomon's talked about this in earlier chapters. We looked at this idea before. God gives us opportunities, and God gives us blessings. And there is nothing sinful or evil or wrong about enjoying the blessings that God gives us. Sometimes people think, if I'm a Christian, then it means I have to have a life of poverty, and I can't enjoy anything. Fun is a bad thing. And there are some religious groups and religious orders where they take this kind of vow of a lifestyle, a vow of poverty. Well, I'm not going to own anything, no kinds of special clothes. Food will be very simple. My whole life is dedicated to meditation and prayer and hard work for the monastery or for the convent. This is not what God wants for his people. In many, many places throughout the Bible, God promised blessings to his people. To the Israelites, he promised them a land of milk and honey, a place where they would be able to rest and relax and enjoy what God had promised them. And as we've studied before, Solomon says that we should take time to enjoy what God gives us each day. Now, life is not easy. Life is often difficult. And as Christians, we face a lot of challenges and struggles and opposition. But that doesn't mean we can't find a certain peace and a certain joy and enjoy some simple pleasures of life each day. And Solomon talked about 4 particular points that we should learn to enjoy. First of all, food and drink. We should enjoy the blessings that God has given us as far as the things that we can eat and drink each day. God has created many, many, many kinds of foods. And many healthy options are available for us. And we should learn to partake of these and to enjoy them and not feel guilty about enjoying good, healthy, wholesome food. Now, that doesn't mean we should be gluttons and gorge ourselves on these things. We need to be moderate. Even healthy food, if you eat too much of it, it's not good for your body. But we need to enjoy what God gives us each day and allow others to enjoy these blessings. Sometimes there are cultural differences about food. I go to my girlfriend's house and, they serve Japanese cuisine. And my girlfriend's like, oh, you should eat this and this and this. I'm like, well, I don't really like this. Oh, you have to eat this. Why? There are many things to eat. We don't have to eat everything. There are options. And Paul talks about this, that we should be careful about criticizing others about food and drink. What we may like, another person may not like. Sometimes it's a question of taste. Sometimes it's a question of health or allergies. God has created many things for us to enjoy. And if one person enjoys one food and another person enjoys another food, if those are healthy dishes or healthy foods, we should allow that person their peace in enjoying what they're eating. There are differences based on culture. Now, of course, I'm not saying that you can eat anything you want. The Bible's very clear that some foods are healthy. Some diets are better than others. But each person is different. Some people have certain allergies or tolerations or intolerations for certain kinds of foods. And we must allow people to eat what they can in order to have a healthy lifestyle. But we should enjoy the food that we have each day. Give thanks to God for what He has provided. And take pleasure in what God has given us. Another point that Solomon talks about is clothing. That we should dress in a good way, in an enjoyable way. Now again, that doesn't mean that we should go out and spend thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars on clothes and fashion accessories. And the Bible's very clear that as Christians we need to be careful about how we dress, because it is a statement about our values and our lifestyle. But as Christians, we don't need to go around in sackcloth, know, we don't need to go around and just rough, simple, the cheapest clothes that we can because we don't want to spend any money on clothes. Sometimes that works to our disadvantage. If we are judged often by how we dress. And if we are working as professional people, we need to dress in a professional way in order to do well in our business as we interact with our colleagues and customers. There's nothing wrong with spending some money on clothes, but you do need to balance that and consider what God has given you and how to use that. If you're a rich person, if you have lots of money, well, then you can obviously afford to spend more on clothes than someone who's middle class or lower class. But in all things, you need to weigh, how are you using your money? Is that the wisest way to spend those funds? And each person is going to have to answer to God someday about how they used their money. But Solomon's very clear, excuse me, Solomon's very clear that we should take care of our appearance, that we should make sure that we look nice and smell nice. Sometimes I wish some Japanese businessmen would be more careful about that when they're crowded on the train. So yes, there's nothing wrong with spending money on yourself and on making yourself presentable and acceptable within the culture that you live. But you have to balance your use of money and time for that. Solomon talks about enjoying married life, that it's a special thing that God has given us. Marriage can be a great blessing if it is entered into and followed in the way that God intended. Working with a partner, someone who can advise you, support you, help take care of you, you take care of them. It's a partnership which can be a great blessing to both people and to the community and the families that are connected. And there's nothing wrong with enjoying married life, Solomon says, and all the things that that involves. But again, you need to also balance your priorities. Of course, family is important. Children are important. Your wife or husband. You need to consider their needs and interests. But you also have to balance that versus your time and commitment to God. And if family pressures or family ties are affecting your relationship with God, then you might need to examine how you're spending your time and your resources and money. But married life is something that Solomon commends, and in Proverbs he has a whole chapter where he talks about the blessings and joys that come when you live in a home with a partner who is a good, positive person, who shares your values, and who you get along well with. But marriage can also be a very unhappy thing, and Solomon also talks a lot about that, about the curses of living with a partner who disagrees with or in conflict with. And there are a lot of unhappy people, a lot of unhappy married people in the world today. Not just in Japan, but around the world. And divorce rates are rising because of that. More people are just giving up on marriage. But it can be a great blessing if you are willing to put time and energy into it. And Solomon commends that to us. And finally, Solomon talks about the enjoyment, excuse me, the enjoyment of work. How many people like working? Okay, I see a few hands. Yeah, I like working. I like teaching. I was talking with one of my business classes, and we were talking about, what would you do if you won a lot of money? And there was someone like, oh, 300 million, yeah, wow, what would I do? I'm like, oh, I would quit my job. That was like one of the first ones. Most of the people said, I'm going to quit my job. And they're like, well, what about you? Would you quit work? I said, no, I wouldn't. And they were very surprised. I said, well, I would take more time off and travel. I'd work part-time, but I don't think I would quit working completely. I like teaching. I like meeting people, working with people. I don't think I would quit my work. And Solomon says that God gave work for us as a blessing. Man was intended to work. That if we apply ourselves, if we do a good job, if we have the right attitude in our work, it's something that builds us up. It's something that brings benefit to other people around us. It's an opportunity for us to witness to other people about our values. Work can be a very positive thing if you have a positive attitude about it. The problem today is many people do not like their jobs. They do not like their companies. They view work as slavery. And if you have that kind of situation, if you don't like your job, if you don't like your company, if you don't enjoy your work, then life is going to be pretty miserable. As Christians, we have to learn to enjoy the situations we are called to. And Paul said, wherever I find myself, I've learned to be content. And that is the key to happiness. Now, we may not always have a lot, excuse me, we may not always have a lot of choices in our work, depending on employment options, employment situations, the economy. But we do have a choice. We do have a choice. And, if you truly hate your job, find a new one. Find a new one. If you don't like your boss, if you don't like your company, if you don't like your prospects, find another job. People are like, oh, no, it's too risky. I may not be able to get another job. Hey, as Christians, we believe God is in control. We are in God's hands. And, if you've prayed about it and you've talked with God and it seems like God is saying, if you want to change your job, do it. Then do it in faith. God will find you a new job if you hate it so much and you can't find any positive or redeeming or blessings in where you're working. Step out in faith. God will help you find a new job or a new opportunity. And we just have to learn to trust Him. As an English teacher in Japan, jobs are very temporary. Most of the contracts that we sign are one-year contracts, which may not be renewed. It depends on the company we're working for. Teaching for the ALT industry, contracts are every year. Even if the school wants you back, it's based on bids. If another company bids lower, then your company doesn't get the contract and you won't be going back there. There's a lot of uncertainty in this industry. But, I've never been unemployed. I've been in Japan how many years? A long time. 25 years now. And I've never been unemployed during that time. I've always been able to find another job. Maybe not always right away. Sometimes I've had, a month off or 6 weeks off. But I've always had work, and I've always had enough work to pay for my bills and my expenses. And some people look at it and say, "Oh, you're crazy," and but God takes care of us. God takes care of us, and we are in God's hands. And if we are living and working in harmony with His will, He has promised to provide all that we need. And so, work should be a blessing, something that we enjoy. Today, we've looked at a few of the ideas and a few of the teachings that Solomon points out in chapter 9. And I think the key point that I'd like you to remember is we are in God's hand. It may not always seem that way. We look around us, we see all of the troubles, the problems, the wars, the violence. And many people say, well, if there is a God of love, how can these things happen? But we have to remember that we live in a sinful world and that people make bad choices. And those bad choices result in bad things happening to other people. That is one of the consequences of sin. That is one of the drawbacks of sin. In a sinful world, good people suffer because of the choices of bad people. Innocent people suffer because of the bad choices other people make. But God is in control of it all. And in the long run, if we walk and trust in Him, He will bring us safely home.